Greetings, music nerds, and welcome to Season 8 of the Music Makers and Soul Shakers podcast. This season is brought to you by our newest sponsors, Larrivee Guitars and Fishman Amplification. I'm your host, Steve Dawson, coming to you from the Hemphill studio in Nashville, Tennessee. This season, I'll be taking you on a journey down the many rabbit holes in the process of making great music. I'll be speaking to instrumentalists, songwriters, producers, up-and-comers through legendary veterans, and we'll go deep into their history and their process of creating unforgettable music. This show continues to be listener-supported. You can help keep the show going with a one-time donation or a Patreon subscription. And when you sign up for Patreon, you get an ad-free version of the show, as well as getting entered to win some killer prizes from our sponsors at the end of the season. We have an incredible Chase Bliss Lossy pedal up for grabs, as well as a Fishman acoustic guitar pickup and effects pedals, as well as a pedal from Union Tube and Transistor, and more. You can get links to all this and sign up now at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Meanwhile, many thanks to the sponsors for this season. Please check them out and let them know that I sent you. They are Larrivee Guitars, Fishman Pickups, Chase Bliss Pedals, Union Tube and Transistor, Spectra 1964, and the Henhouse Hang. All right, thanks for tuning in, and let's get down to it. Howdy, music nerds, and thanks for joining me once again. This is episode number 161, and my guest this week is the incredible Mississippi songwriter, guitarist, and drummer Cedric Burnside. Cedirc comes from a long line of hill country blues musicians. His dad is the great drummer Calvin Jackson, and he's the grandson of the legendary R.L. Burnside, one of the great traditional Mississippi blues artists of all time. Cedirc is a killer guitar player and songwriter who seems to really understand his place in the landscape of modern music. He's able to make records that sound fresh and current, but is very much honoring the traditions of the hill country region. It's a totally unique style of music that you can sort of catch glimpses of with artists like John Lee Hooker and Jessie Mae Hemphill, but the really traditional stuff is even more specific than that. It's born in the juke joints of northern Mississippi, and the music is usually driven by guitars and drums and vocals. It's hypnotic, it's relentless, it's really unpredictable and exciting to see live. It's almost like the kind of music that you'd think wouldn't translate that well to record, but in Cedric's hands, it does. Cedirc is also a fantastic drummer who's played with all kinds of artists, including, of course, his grandfather, R.L. Burnside, but also Jimmy Buffett, Widespread Panic, T-Model Ford, and the Jon Spencer Blues Explosion. He has a bunch of albums out under his own name, including the Grammy Award-winning I Be Trying from 2021 and the brand new Hill Country Love, both of which we'll be talking about today. You can get all the info on the new album and his extensive worldwide tour dates at CedricBurnside.net. So now please enjoy my conversation with Cedric Burnside. Well, thanks for doing this, man. Where are you? Are you in New York?
No, I'm actually in Mississippi. I'm still in Mississippi. I hit the road here pretty soon.
Well, I'd love to talk about the new record. I actually haven't heard the whole new record yet, so I can't talk in depth about it. And it's not available for a little while. So unfortunately, I can't get super deep into that because I've only heard a couple tunes. But I do know your music really well, and I'm hoping we can sort of dive in and dig into some of the things that I love about it. What I'd love to start talking about, and I think you could maybe sort of take this however you want, but the thing that I love about your music is the sense of tradition that's in there from the hill country and from your family. Obviously, it's such a rich history, and you grew up around the music in that area and around your grandfather and your father, who were just such iconic musicians. And I just would love to hear your take on your music, which to me, the thing that I love the most about your music is that it sounds so modern, and there's things that you bring to the table in your songwriting, the way that you deliver, that are decidedly different from what R.L. would have done, for example, but they just sound like you, and all that tradition's still like really deeply in there with what you're doing. And I wonder if maybe you could just talk a little bit about how you feel your role is with the history and the future of hill country music.
Good question. Yeah, man. I have to say, just growing up with my big daddy, R.L., it was quite amazing within itself. I used to sit around and watch him, do his thing, practicing on the guitar. Sometimes he'll be sitting on the porch. Sometimes he'll be sitting in his room, at night, and he'll be just practicing on the guitar. But I always knew, just from the house parties that my big daddy used to throw that I wanted to play this music. I always knew I wanted to play it. And I used to be one of many grandchildren just sitting there in amazement. You know, the other kids would be jumping around, dancing, kicking up dust. I would be zoomed in, on my big daddy and my dad, playing, and my uncles. And I would be one of those grandkids to be like, wow, I got to play this music. I am going to play this music. I'm playing this music,
Yeah, man.
I started going to the juke joints, when I was about 10 years old. I was good enough to play in the juke joints. And I got an uncle named Cedric Burnside, which is an amazing musician himself. But he was playing bass at the time. And he and I used to go there to the juke joints and play because, they wouldn't have a house band. The bass player wouldn't show up, the drummer wouldn't show up. And we would go there and we would be the house band. I wrote my first song when I was about 12 years old. I don't know if it would have been good to people or not. But I started writing when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
And
oh, no kidding.
I was influenced, by my big daddy. I watched him. I listened at his words. Looking at his fingers on the guitar.
When you say Big Daddy, you're referring to RL, right?
Uh-huh. My grandfather, RL.
Okay,
RL.
Your grandfather. Yeah.
Yep, RL was my big daddy.
I like that.
And so I would watch him a lot, man. And so I started to write my own song. And, I didn't even know that, I would be playing with him, around age 13. I didn't even know it. It's just something, this music was something I always, loved. I fell in love with it. It captured my heart at a young age. And I just happened to be, playing drums with my big daddy at age 13 and became his drummer. But to get back to that question, to make a long story short, all of that helped me be able to write songs for myself, even now. And so when I write these songs, I know we in modern times. So the music in the song will sound modern, but it will also sound, a little traditional and old school too, because that's where my heart is. Growing up in the Burnside family and just growing up around, cats like my big daddy RL and Junior Kimbrough and, Otha Turner, Jesse May Hemphill. Growing up around those cats, man, it just gave me an old soul, and I still got that to this day, even though we're in modern times,
Where you grew up, what was the name of the town?
I grew up in a little town on the outskirts of Holly Springs. I always say Holly Springs because the town I grew up in was really, really small. It was called Chulahoma, Mississippi.
Okay.
I think the Black Keys wrote a album called Chulahoma.
Were some of those people like Jessie Mae Hemphill, I know like originally was from that area, but did she stay there her whole life? Like was she there as she was still performing and touring, but she'd come back there and that was still her home base?
It was. She was from a town called Senatobia, Mississippi, which is like 25 minutes up the road from Chulahoma, But yeah, she would travel, and then she would come back to Mississippi, and she passed in Mississippi.
Yeah, I saw her. Man, I don't know, like I guess it was probably 30 years ago. I remember seeing her, and she totally blew my mind. Like I'd never heard anything like it before. I'm from Canada. I'm from Vancouver in Canada.
Oh wow!
And
okay.
That was like my first real gig that I'd ever seen somebody playing what I would consider. I'd seen John Lee Hooker, but she was like a whole different level of like craziness to me.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
I just really, I loved her, man. And, I never saw her again, but that one time it was probably in Oregon or something that I saw her.
Okay.
But it was just so hypnotic to me. And, that's sort of how I got into that music. I've been listening to a lot of people, including RL and yourself ever since, but she was my gateway into it for sure.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a good one. That's a good one to, listen at, to put you there. Miss Jessie Mae, man, she was amazing, in her songwriting and in her guitar playing, but she was a firecracker too, so she lived that life, man. She She always had that 38 special in a bag. You know,
Oh yeah.
you never would know, but she always had it, man. You know, and so did my granddad. You know, he always had his 38 special in his pocket or somewhere close. You know,
Yeah.
so they definitely lived that life. You know, they didn't just play the blues. They lived the blues. You know.
What was the actual scene like for you as a kid? Like you're in those juke joints as a pretty young kid, like
Yeah.
8, 10, 12 years old.
Yeah.
What was the scene like in there? Like that was, you know, however many years ago that was. Was it crazy? Was it more subdued and just sort of like a bar, or like what was actually going on in some of those places that you were playing in at that time?
Man, yeah, the first thing you said, it was really crazy. But you know, it was a lot of things. It was amazing to me because being young and being able to play music for older people and watch older people dance and stomp up dust to your music, you know, it was a lot of things, but it was definitely scary. Um, you know, I am happy and glad where I come from, you know, my history and all of that. But if I have to tell you that the juke joint really wasn't a place for young kids like myself and my uncle, you know, I would be lying because it wasn't the place because we saw people get sloppy drunk and argue and fight. And we saw people, you know, smoking marijuana and just, you know, we saw a lot of things that we, you know, probably shouldn't have saw, but it helped shape us into the,
Mhm.
you know, the people we are today. And if I say that I would give up all that, I wouldn't. I'll be lying too because I wouldn't give up nothing. I wouldn't change anything because you know, Mr. Kimbrough, you know, he showed me a lot about music. My big daddy, Aria Burnside, he showed me a lot about music. You know, Mr. Kimbrough used to set us down in the juke joint, Gary and myself, um, and show us his music, you know, note for note. He used to show it
Mhm.
to us. And because that's the only way we was going to be able to play. But he knew in his heart that, you know, there's going to be times where the bass player don't show up. You know, there's going to be times where the drummer, you know, don't show up. They can't make it. Um, and we stayed like literally, we stayed about maybe 35 or 40 feet away from Junior Kimbrough's juke joint. So it was just right across the yard from us. So he did right by showing us the music because we will always be there.
He's got a band for life.
Yeah, he got a band for life, man. We used to, you know, man, leave the juke joint. Sometimes we would leave out of the juke joint about 3 a.m., maybe 4 a.m. And
Yeah.
our school bus would run around 6 to 6:30 a.m. So we would leave the juke joint and go home and, you know, take a shower and change clothes and just get ready for school. We didn't even
Oh
go to
my
sleep a
God.
lot of times, you know.
Oh my God. That's crazy. So the juke joints would generally run till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. That was pretty normal for that whole
Oh,
thing.
yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Did they have names, or was it just like we're going to juniors tonight, or we're going to RLs or whatever? Like, were there names to the? Did the bars have actual names that?
Well, that was the name. You know,
Okay.
they would call it Junior's Juke Joint, you know.
Okay.
And so people would come, man, from, you know, miles around, you know, the community would be there and people would just come from 30, 40 miles away, sometimes, you know, further than that, just to hear that music on the weekend, man. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know why, you know, Sunday was the main, you know, day for the juke joint for people to come listen, but
Oh, really? Okay. That was the night when it got rocking. Was Sunday night.
that was the rocking night for some reason. It was
Wow.
Sunday was the rocking night. And man, when I tell you it was rocking, I mean for a half a mile each way on the highway, cars would be just packed. You know, the parking lot would be
God.
packed, and the parking lot wouldn't even have enough space for cars, so they would have to park on the side of the road. And
Yeah.
for both ways, the you know, on the side of the road for about half a mile, people would park, and it got so rough a couple weekends till the police had to come And they was like, look, man, we're gonna have to move some of these cars. You know, people can't hardly come up the main highway because these cars, you know.
But they were cool enough to not shut it down? Like,
Oh, yes.
that didn't happen?
Oh, they loved
Oh,
it as
okay.
well, you know, and that's a great thing. When you got the police behind you, you know, that I think that's
Yeah.
going pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. I saw you playing drums for Leighton and Malcolm somewhere on Beale Street. I don't know how many years ago, quite a few years ago.
Hmm.
And loved what you were doing on the drums. I guess a lot of people that would see you now or that are fans of your music now wouldn't even necessarily know that you were a drummer originally. But can you tell me a little bit about, like, was that kind of a default thing? Did you get into it because RL was just looking around going, hey, where's my drummer? I need somebody. And you hopped up there and started playing? Or were you like, did you just love the drums? Or what's your history with getting into the drums in the first place?
Wow. Actually, you know, when I was 6, 7 years old, my big dad used to throw house parties every other weekend, you know. So the house was sort of like his juke joint, you know.
Mhm.
And so he used to throw house parties every other weekend. Him and my dad, Calvin Jackson, and my uncles, you know, Daniel Burnside and Joseph Burnside, they would just jam out. And me, once again, I was that grandkid that was sitting there in amazement, you know, and I was watching my dad play drums, and it's something that I wanted to do so bad. I used to play buckets and pans, and you know, just drive my mom crazy, and she would kick me out the house like, "You got to get out of here with that." So I would go outside on the porch and just play buckets and pans. I never had played a drum set before in my life, and so one evening, you know, my big daddy and you know my dad, they took a break to go do the thing, you know, drink a little moonshine and mingle. Um, and I wanted to get on those drums so bad. And I found the courage to just jump up there. I think I was about 7 years old, between 7 and 8
Whoa.
years old. And I just found the courage to get up there on those drums. And people started saying, look at that little young man, you know, he gonna be good someday, you know. Um, and I'm sure I sounded awful, you know, I sounded so bad. But I guess, you know, the big thing is I wasn't scared to get up there, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't let the fear, you know, get in me to run away, but I got up there on them and I started trying to play them, you know, and by me doing that, um, you know, 7, 8 years old, by the time I turned 10 years old, I was good enough to play in the juke joints.
Did you have a kit around? I guess you did, right? You had a kit around the house that you could actually practice like a proper kit on, or were you just bashing on pans until you were 10?
I did not have a kid at the house.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, I was just bashing on, you know, pots and pans until that one day that my dad let me get on the drums. Um,
Yeah.
and when I got on the drums, then it was all about me going to the juke joints, you know, and playing the drums. I did not have one at home, but I was able to go to the juke joints and, you know, practice a little bit. My uncle and I, Gary, we would go, and sometimes they would let us just, you know, go crazy on the instruments because there don't be nobody there. And so we would go there and we would just, you know, play and practice and practice and practice. And that practice turned out to be, you know, pretty good for us
Yeah.
because we became the house band.
So a lot of those places would have their own gear there. They'd have a couple amps and a drum kit and a couple microphones or whatever, and they just leave them there.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
that's pretty handy.
Now it wouldn't be the best. It wouldn't be the best equipment.
That's a good way to learn, though. Like learning
Yeah,
on kind of like beat up stuff. It's good. It's kind
yeah.
of good for you, I think.
I remember the drum set that Mr. Kimbrough had in his juke joint, man. Um, it what's the name of that drum set? Man, how do I forget the name of that drum set? But it had tempo. He had the tempo drum set, and
Okay.
man, it had tape on every tom, and you know, you had wire, like a piece of a clothes
Yeah.
hanger wire on the foot pedal to make everything work. You know,
Yeah.
but man, those drums sounded really, really good, even
Yeah.
though they had tape on them. Even though we had to piece the foot pedal together with some wire, they sounded good.
All that sweat and humidity and beer.
Oh, how can I forget that?
Was there a lot of PVs down there, like in the juke joints? Because those are Mississippi amps, right? PVs?
There was a lot of PVs. Matter of fact, Mr. Kimbrough had a PV. He had a PV amp, but he did have a old Silvertone
oh, cool.
amp. He had an old Silvertone amp that he had been playing for a long time. It was very old, but it still worked. And so he left both of those at the juke joint. They was there at all times.
Nice.
And I forget what kind of bass rig he had, but the bass rig gave out on him, for a while back. And so some people will use a guitar amp to play the bass through, because he had two guitar amps there, the Silvertone and the PV.
So you blew a few speakers probably along the way?
Yes. Oh, yeah. You better believe it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the real hallmarks for you as somebody that's deep into hill country blues and playing different instruments. From a drummer's point of view, it's pretty relentless. Like there's a lot of 4 on the floor, there's a lot of high energy, pretty high volume, like intensity on the kit. What as far as just from a drummer's point of view, what makes hill country, what makes that groove and playing that style of music unique to you?
Well, I can tell you 2 reasons. One is, the hill country blues always has that droning beat, that kick that's never quits, that doop, 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 doop. You always have that in hill country,
Yeah.
But another reason is what makes hill country drumming so unique is the guitar player, because they have such rhythm in it, and it can be very unorthodox a lot of times.
Yeah.
Not on the 1-4-5 pattern.
Totally.
It could be completely off. And being a hill country drummer, you had to find some kind of way to put some drums to that music, no matter how it sounds.
Yeah.
And I was one of those cats that could do it. And I used to watch my dad, Calvin Jackson. I used to watch Kenny Kimbrough, one of Junior's sons, and a guy named Artemis LeSure. And they was, from the hill country area. And those are three of the cats that I used to watch growing up, as I was over there at the juke joint and we play. I used to sit and watch them and try to mimic what they do. And when they don't come, I have a few chops that I done, learned from them, But I would say those are the most 2 unique things of hill country drumming is just learning to play behind the unorthodox rhythm of the guitar, as well as keeping that kick going all the time. I have saw a lot of drummers get up there and try to play with that drone and kick, and they feet will get tired so quick,
I wondered about that because it is like when I saw you playing wherever it was, somewhere on Beale, it was relentless. Like it was, and you guys played a long time, like a couple, like 2.5 hours probably of like full tilt. I don't even know if there was more than one song. It might have been one song for a couple hours.
No, I think it was more than one for 2.5 hours.
Now, here's another thing that I need some clarification on is the instrumentation. Often there is no bass player, but is that by definition or is that out of choice? Is there a reason for that? Like I've seen you play quite a few times. Usually there's no bass player. Sometimes there is. On a lot of your records, there's no bass player, but sometimes there is. A lot of your live videos that I've found, there's often no bass player. So what's the scoop with the bass player?
That's a great question, man. Well, my big daddy, back in the day, of course, we got a very musical family, but sometimes the bass player wouldn't show up. and no matter if the bass player show up or not, you still had to, do what you had to do to play that music. So a lot of times we would play just guitar and drums, and it will get in such a groove to people forget that there's no bass.
Yeah.
And so we would groove so hard doing that. And then eventually, my big daddy started playing with two guitars and drums. But for a long time, we played just guitar and drums because it had became a thing then.
Okay.
But it wasn't by choice that we was going to play just guitar and drums. We normally would play with a bass player, but because of the bass player never kept not showing up, we just did it.
Well, it turned into a thing, and the thing that I love about it is that, like, when you see those videos of like RL playing or whatever, and with you playing drums, there's that freedom to it. It's almost like jazz or something where the changes that you expect don't happen, and you're kind of avoiding like the whole train wreck of the bass player playing the wrong chord. If he's not there, it's not going to happen. So that without the bass, it really frees up that kind of music, I think, where the changes are like almost improvised or totally random. I'm sure to you, like, there's patterns to it that you know, even if it's not, like a 12-bar progression, you kind of know when he's going to change, but a bass player might not, right? Correct.
You are absolutely correct, man. And it also goes back into what I was saying a while ago. That's kind of what creates that unorthodox rhythm. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It creates that unorthodox rhythm because you don't have a bass, and the guitar player has their own feel. They got their own feel, they got their own rhythm. They might put a change in there, they might not. But if they do put a change in there, you got to be the one on the drums to try to catch that change. Kind of feel that change. To put it in better words, if they feel it, you have to feel it.
Right.
I found myself, playing drums behind musicians, hill country musicians, man, that had their own feel, and it was so unorthodox, but I was determined, to put some drums behind them, and they would change, do a weird change. And sometimes I would change just slightly behind them, but enough not to throw me off or not to throw them off.
Right.
And that became a thing, and it became a really great thing for me to have a good listening ear behind other hill country musicians, that I would find myself playing drums behind that had that unique rhythm,
Like, it probably turned into such a thing with playing with RL where if a bass player did play with you, it might have kind of screwed things up a little, or like just made it a little bit too restrictive in a way, right?
Well, if they wasn't from the area, it would kind of, screw things up. But my uncle, Gary Burnside, phenomenal bass player. He can play behind anybody, 145 or not. But, he was one of Junior Kimbrough's original bass player. And so he was so used to that unorthodox rhythm, so he could just jump behind and play like it wasn't nothing. My uncle Dwayne Burnside, he grew up in that area, and he could play the bass behind any, hill country musician because, he was used to it. He grew up with it.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about guitar, because that's like that's kind of the main thing for you now. Do you still play drums?
I do.
With anybody else?
I do.
Okay.
I don't play as much. I don't play as much, live anymore, like, traveling anymore. Although I want to bring that back eventually. But I do set them up at home, and I just, fill them up.
Nice. Yeah. All right. So with guitar, I'm interested in like, obviously you learned by watching all the amazing people that you were around, probably more than anything else. But like, there's a tune that I saw you do called "We Made It" that I don't know if that's a tune you wrote, or is that one of your tunes?
It is. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a guitar player, and I come at it from like, I learned to play from like learning like Mississippi John Hurt and Chet Atkins and people that were doing like kind of like predictable isn't the right word, but like very pattern oriented things with the
Yeah.
right hand.
Yeah.
On a tune like that, I'm trying to figure out what your right hand is doing. I don't even know if you're probably not thinking about it. So I don't know if you're able to even say what you're doing, but there seems to be a pattern, but it also seems so random that I can't figure out if it's a pattern or not. So are you just kind of like improvising that stuff, or is there a way to play that song that you play it like that every time?
That's a good question, man. And I'm laughing because you are absolutely right. Even though you don't know if you're right or not, but you are. You are. So
Okay, good.
so to be honest, man, I don't know what my hands are doing. I just know I can pick up the guitar and I can do it every time. I can do it
Yeah.
every time. And I think a part of that is because, what I hear in my head, I thank the Lord that I'm able to play it. There have been so many times that I tried to show it to guitar players and they were like, man, I don't understand like what you doing.
Yeah.
Also, there have been times where I'm in the studio and the drummer tried to come in on this song and they would be totally lost. They were like, I
flipped
don't know
around
how
or
to
whatever.
come in on this song. And I get it. I understand. They think to me that it'll be like, oh man, I'm talking about Cedric Burnside music. No, I totally get it.
Yeah.
It's unorthodox. It's something that you ain't used to playing. So if I have to show you, I'll show you. And I have to get behind the drums and kind of show them how to come in on this song because it is a unique way to come in on it. And if you don't come in on it that way, you'll miss it every time.
Then you're screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your process for learning guitar? Like, how old were you when you picked it up? And was it just like watching people play that you picked all that stuff up? Or were you like, did you sit down with records and learn how to play off records? Or what was your process for learning guitar?
Well, I got my first guitar, man. And that's a great question. Thanks for asking that question. I got my first guitar from Luther Dixon.
I know Luther.
My brother from another mother. And he gave me an old acoustic harmony, and I peeled around on that guitar, man.
When was this? Like how long ago did you pick up guitar?
It was around 2002, 2003.
You hadn't played guitar before that?
I was peeling around on a piece of a guitar, but no, I wasn't playing guitar. No, I wasn't. I was just kind of peeling around on stuff. And me and Luther did a tour. I think it was 2000. It was 2002. We did a tour together. I was playing with Kenny Brown at the time, and we had a Japanese bass player named Takeshi Yomura, and we was opening it up for JoJo Herman, from Widespread Panic. Luther and Cody just happened to be the backup musicians for JoJo on that tour.
Okay.
And we was on a bus, and we was, I think we was doing the West Coast tour, and Luther had a guitar on the bus, and I picked it up and I started, kind of pilling around on it. He was like, "Man, I didn't know you try to play guitar." I was like, I'm not very good right now, but I got a few little things that I try to do on the guitar, And so he said, "Well, I got a guitar for you," and he didn't have it with him on that tour, but when shortly after we got back off that tour, in 2002, him and my uncle met up, Gary Burnside, and he gave Gary that guitar, that harmony to give me. So I started peeling around and playing the guitar, trying to really play it around 2003.
Okay.
I started really
cool.
trying to play the guitar,
Luther gave you your first guitar. That's so crazy.
Yeah, gave me my first guitar, man.
Wicked. Was it all just self-taught? Like, were you just kind of like getting in there and doing what you felt, or were you bringing in things that you'd learned from RL and from other people? Well,
at first, it was more of me just doing my own thing. If it sounded cool, I did it. But then I started going around. My uncle, he was very good on guitar, Gary Burnside. So he started to show me a little something. I started off playing in open tuning, all open, because it was just the tuning that was used to the most. So I started peeling around, doing things on my own. And when I saw Luther, he showed me just a little something, you know. And so I would take what I already knew and what people showed me, and I would just kind of make it my own, you know. And then, I played open tuning for so long. Everything was in open tuning. Even though I could make it, I just had this thing that I can make it look different. The song sounds different because, the Lord gave me that gift. But I wanted to start playing in standard. I didn't want to just play in open. And so I started practicing with my uncle, Gary Burnside, and he started showing me a little standard tuning. And, I just kind of stayed dedicated, man. I went to sleep a lot of nights with the guitar in my hand, and my kids were like, Daddy, you need to put the guitar down so you can go to sleep. So I went to sleep, man, gripping it.
Yeah, that's cool. So the open tuning, it was probably G that you were using,
Open
right?
G, correct. Open G and a little bit in open C.
Oh, okay. Like a low C below the E?
Yeah, but a low C.
C.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I saw you playing quite a bit with open G. So do you still use all the open tunings, or do you kind of stick to standard tuning now?
Yeah, I use them both. Yeah. Okay. On this new album, I use both tunings. I use open tuning and standard tuning. Thank the Lord.
You got it all figured out now.
I got it all figured out, man. I done peeled around on it enough that I finally know a little something now.
Yeah. So just talking about I Be Tryin', because that's like, I know that record really well. I don't know the new record well enough to talk that much about it, but I do want to ask you about the recording of it, because it's coming out soon, and by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be out, so people will be able to check it out. But I Be Tryin' was the last one that you put out. That was 2021. There's a couple times where you mentioned Boo. So am I correct in assuming you did that at Royal with Boo Mitchell?
Yes, I did. I did that at Royal Studio with Boo Mitchell.
Okay, cool. And there is a bit of bass on that record, right?
I think one song got bass on it.
Okay. So there's something that you're doing on that album that is so cool. And I don't even know how to describe it, because I can't quite figure out what's going on. But it sounds like possibly 3 or 4 overdubbed guitars kind of doing the same thing and then kind of not. Can you tell me a little bit about how you sculpt that stuff? Because I think it's brilliant. Whatever it is you're up to, I just want to know something about what's going on in there, because I can't tell.
Wow. Well, I have to tell you, man, I did not go back and double any guitar. It's just it's this thing I come up with, playing a few of the strings at the same time. It almost sounds like a 12-string guitar almost. Some songs, but I figured something out on the guitar that I don't even know if people even tried it, but it sounded cool to me, and I practiced on it until I got it. So I'm plucking 2 or 3 strings at the same time. It was very challenging. It was very challenging, but I liked it so much too. I just, did it till I figured it out. I'm not doing it on all the songs, but
there's a tune called Step In where, like, that to me sounds like there's got to be 2 guitars.
It is 2 guitars. See, on Step In, Luther is playing slide guitar.
Oh, that's Luther.
Yeah, Luther is playing slide guitar on Step In. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a way that you guys mesh together that's just really magical to me.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, it's great.
And on a couple of songs, I love violin. I love cello. I think it fits my music. A lot of the songs I write, I think violin and cello fits it. And I just love the sound. So I got cello, a dude named Caleb. I forget Caleb's last name. He's from Muscle Shoals, Alabama. But I got him to play cello on a couple songs. And I Be Tryin' is one of those songs I got him to play cello on.
Yeah, and the melody to that song I love. It's very traditional kind of melody, but it's not at all what you'd expect over that kind of a chord progression kind of thing. Can you tell me a little bit about how you write your songs? Like, are you sitting down working them out for quite a while, or are they just coming to you quickly, or what's the? I don't know I don't know what's going on in there.
Well, I I was blessed, to be a songwriter. I can go over in the corner here in 20 minutes. I can come up with a song. Um, but I try to stay true to how I live my life. I
Hmm.
try to write my songs according to how I live my life and things that I go through in life. Um, and my family, my friends. I just refuse to write about anything that I don't do or I haven't been through. You know, uh,
Yeah.
if I don't have it, I don't write about it. If I haven't been through it, I don't write about it. I want it to be real. So when I write my songs, I want people to be able to relate to what I'm talking about. Maybe they done
Hmm.
been there and they done that. Um, but I might come up with a couple verses with no music, and then I might come up with you know 3 or 4 riffs on the guitar, and no lyrics.
Yeah.
It come to me in all kind of ways. I can say I'm very inspired being in Mississippi. I always been inspired being here because I can go out on the porch, I can hear the birds chirping and all these crazy sounds, the crickets and frogs, and it just it put me at a peaceful space, and I can just write, man.
Yeah.
I have written 4 or 5 songs in about 45 minutes, and great songs.
So on a tune like "I Be Trying," where there is cello,
Hmm.
I mean, it sounds like you're essentially it's a live performance. Was it done that way even with the cello, or was that like an overdub kind of thing?
It was. We played it live,
Yeah.
but he did go back and add the cello in. But
Okay.
I did do the song live with just me, the guitar, and the drums. We was both in one room,
Yeah.
and just like we were set up on stage. And Caleb came in later, and then he laid the cello down on it.
So would you set up like a PA too for your vocals, or were we just on headphones, like more of a traditional studio kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. I had headphones.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. On a tune like Pretty Flowers, where it's like so driven by the drums, and you're a drummer.
Hmm.
I'm assuming that's not you playing drums on that.
It's not.
How do you find drummers to do what you want them to do? Do you have a guy that you just always go to, or do you sit down and go, I want this tune to go like this, and you show them? How do you do that? Because that must be a big part of it for you.
Wow, man, you are absolutely correct. The guy playing drums on that tune, Reed Watson. He's also from Florence, Alabama. I call both of those, muscle shoals because
Yeah.
they're just right across the bridge from each other. But Reed Watson is playing drums, and a lot of times there are a lot of times where I have to, put my guitar down and go behind the drums and show the drummer the beat that I want.
Yeah.
There, more times than not, I will have to show the drummer uh, on a few songs the beat that I want, that I hear in my head,
Mm.
because they can't get it, and I had to show Reed, um, you know, the track that I want, the rhythm that I wanted on that song. It was more of a funky rhythm,
Yeah.
but I think he started off playing it a little bit slow, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
no, 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 no. You got to pick the tempo. Got to come up some.
Yeah.
And if you would like for me to show you, I don't mind. I will show you. Some drummers get a little discouraged
Yeah.
because they are great drummers. It's not because they're not a great drummer. Um,
Right.
it's because you're playing something totally different, the total opposite of what you used to playing.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. So if I have to show you, I'll show you. It's no problem. You know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're absolutely right, man.
They gotta check their ego at the door.
Yeah, of course. You absolutely right about that. Because if they don't, they'll get discouraged. They'll get mad because they'll think that, they're not good enough, or you're talking about their drumming. But it's not that at all.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
not that at all.
I would imagine it's intimidating for people too to play drums for you because you're such a great drummer and you're known as a drummer, and they're probably like, "Oh shit, I got to play drums for Cedric." That's
I
not
have
easy.
heard that before. Yep.
What was it like tracking at Royal? Like, that's a pretty legendary room. Was that had you spent much time in there before, or was that like a first time thing for you?
Man, I have been knowing Boo since I was about 14 years old.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've been knowing him a long time. But and we always talked about, recording an album. We always talked about it. I have been in that studio with other musicians. I have been in that studio with Boo. But for some reason, the time didn't, let us make any music together at that time. And so when I signed with Single Lock and they wanted to do, the second album, I say, man, I know exactly where I want to record this album at. They asked me, do I know a studio? And of course, I told them Royal Studio, in Memphis, Boo. And man, we had such a great time. But I can tell you one thing that they didn't know about me. Boo was like, man, nobody come up with great hits, before 11, 12 o'clock. But I'm so used to coming up, I started coming up with my music early in the AM, 5:30, 6 o'clock, I'm up. And I'm working on music, So I go in the studio, and in my the record company I was with at the time, Single Lock, they was like, man, we're gonna carve out about 3 weeks, 3, maybe 4 weeks for you to get this album done. I was like, 3 weeks? Oh, what are you talking about? 3 weeks? Obviously, you guys don't know how I like to,
I need 2 days.
I said, give me 3 days. I said 3 days. Yeah. And we was done. I was done in 2. We just took that third day to go in and listen at things and change what we wanted to change. But I said, give me 3 days. And Reed looked at me like, what? Like, man, get out of here with that,
Yeah.
And so I told him, I said, man, I need 3 days. And so they felt really uneasy about giving me those 3 days.
I'm surprised that they were surprised.
Well, yeah, they were surprised. And I told them, I was like, man, I'm quite a different musician than probably the musicians that you normally used to working with. And so I went in there and I did 8 songs on the first day. I recorded 8 songs on the first day, and they was blown away. They was like, what the hell,
Did you have to twist Boo's arm to start before like 10 a.m.?
Well, we still started. We still started at 11, 12 o'clock. We still did that. But it didn't matter to me because I knew what I was going to do when I go in the studio. I don't need that much time because I know how I want to do the song. I know how I want to lay it down before I even go in the studio,
Right.
And so I recorded 8 songs, and we started at 11 o'clock that day. And by, I think, 6 o'clock that evening, I had 8 songs down. And the next day I come in and I knocked out about 10 or 12 more songs,
Whoa.
We was on a roll, and I blew their mind. And that's just how I do things,
I mean, Boo's probably used to working quickly, but maybe not that quickly.
Yeah. Well, Boo is great in the studio, man. He know exactly what he's doing. But I think, more people need their sleep than others. I'm an early bird, and I'm used to getting up early. I always have. But yeah, Boo, his start time is around 11 o'clock. No later than 11.
How far are you from Memphis? Probably not that far, right?
About an hour.
Like a couple hours?
Mm-hmm. About an hour. Yeah, not a couple hours.
It blows my mind how physically close you are to Memphis, and yet how radically different the music is. It's so different. When you think about how, Memphis has all kinds of music, obviously, but what it's really famous for is like, that really well-crafted, short, punchy horns, like very well arranged, like
Yeah.
perfectly, that whole Stax thing is like, it's such a thing. It's such a big part of the Memphis sound and other things too. But what you're doing just an hour away is pretty radically different from that. It's pretty crazy.
I agree. And I don't heard people, people done told me that before, man. It was like, man, you guys stay so close to Memphis, but your music is so different. And it is, Hill Country, man, in Hollow Springs, they just got, it's something it's its own thing,
Yeah.
And it's not to say that this music is superior to any other music out there. It's just a different blues. It's got a different rhythm, what I'm saying? It's got a different sound. And that's just what it is. It's different from anything that you might, listen at when it comes down to blues. But I'm really, really glad, man, to have something different. It makes me different. It makes my Big Daddy different, and all the other cats, Junior Kimbrough, it's all different. But in a good way, it's different in a good way. And I always like different, a good different, I always like it. And you hear a lot of songs these days that really sound so similar, really sound just alike, you don't know who playing what. You don't know if the song done changed or not, because you have so many songs out there that sounds the same. But you can't say that this music here sounds like other songs that you done heard,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So tell me about making the new record. So Hill Country Love, it's out. Well, as we're doing this, it's not out, but it will be out by the time this comes out, so people can hear it. You made that with Luther?
I did.
So tell me about the session for that, how it came about, and where you did it and all that.
Well, we recorded it in a little town called Ripley, Mississippi. At the time, I thought that this building that we recorded this album in was going to be my new juke joint. But Luther and I was on the road with his brother Cody Dickinson, and I was with it was me, it was Luther and Cody, and it was Sharday Thomas, Mr. Olther's granddaughter.
Yeah, I just saw her playing here in Nashville not a couple of weeks ago.
I love her, man. I love her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And her boyfriend, about to be husband, Chris. I love him, man. But we was on a tour called The Voices of Mississippi, and as we was on that tour, I think Mr. Bobby Rush did about 2 weeks with us, and Miss Ruthie Foster. And so on that tour, I was telling Luther, I said, man, I'm about ready to record another album. And he was like, man, come to Zebra Ranch. And I told him, I said, man, I don't mind coming to Zebra Ranch. I said,
that's for listeners, that's the Dickinson family studio.
Yeah, that's Luther and Cody's studio in Coldwater, Mississippi, which is awesome, by the way. But
how far is that from you?
Maybe about 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was telling Luther that, and I was telling him, I said, man, I played acoustic in this building, and this building is gonna sound good with music. When it's open, when the juke joint is open, it's gonna sound really great. It got wood ceilings, wood walls, wood floors. I said, it sounds like a big jukebox up in there. The acoustics is awesome. And so Luther was like, well, man, you want to record it in the juke joint? And I was like, you know what, man, that might be really cool. So that's what we did. Luther.
Oh, no way.
Luther took down all of his gear from the Zebra Ranch and brought it to the juke joint.
Yeah.
And we sat up, man, right there in the middle, excuse me, of the floor, and we recorded the album. And we gave ourselves 3 days. We was done in 2 days. And we used the third day to, just like we did at Boo, we used the third day to kind of go in and see what we wanted to change and stuff like that. But he brought all the gear to that juke joint building.
So did you just set all the recording equipment up in the same room as you guys, or was there a control room, or how?
It was a cold room. It was a cold room. It was a pretty big building. It used to be an office, a lawyer's office.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and it had an upstairs and downstairs. And we went in there and did a lot of, tearing down because it had about 12 to 14 office rooms in it. And so we
Yeah.
knocked down all the walls to have it just one big open space. And man,
Oh.
it sounded awesome.
Did you buy this building or something?
I did not. Well, the landlord, that owned the building, he's quite older, and he was, trying his best to uh, get it done by a certain time, but he just couldn't. And so when we couldn't really, get it done like it's supposed to be done, I kind of had to just, not get the building because
Oh,
it
wow.
took a
Okay.
lot. It needed a lot of work.
Yeah.
And us tearing the walls down made it better than it was because we cleaned up everything. And
Yeah.
there's a story to this building, but I kind of have to keep that off the camera.
All right. All right.
But yeah, it didn't get done in time, so it didn't end up in my juke joint, but it did end up recording an awesome album. You know,
Wow, that's so cool.
yeah,
So the equipment was in a coat room.
yeah,
Is that what you said?
yeah.
And you guys were just out on the floor. So it's you, Luther, drummer. Is there a bass player?
Luther played bass on this album.
Oh, he does.
Yeah, I
Okay.
played the baritone guitar on one of the
Nice.
songs, which is called "Told on Day Life." I played baritone
Yeah.
guitar on that. So I guess you could say I played bass on that song. But Luther played bass on all the songs on this album, and he played slide guitar on a few songs as well.
Okay.
And the drummer was one of the guys I told you I used to watch all the time, Artemis LaSure. He played
Okay.
drums on this album, and
Yeah.
I got another friend from New Orleans. I like to call him my brother from another mother too. His name is Patrick Williams, and he blowed harmonica on
Oh,
the album.
nice.
It's a really great album, man. I think it's one of my best albums yet. You know,
How was the actual tracking experience for you? Was it different in any noticeable way?
no, it was quite the same, but I mean, we just had so
Yeah.
much fun. You know,
Yeah.
recording it in this old building. This was one of the oldest buildings in Ripley. It's about 150 years old.
Whoa.
But we just had so much fun, man. We went and got a cooler full of drinks and a bunch of snacks, and we just went and locked ourselves in this building for 3 days and just come
Yeah.
up with something really, really great.
You're playing guitar for the most part. You play a bit of baritone.
Mhm.
When you play guitar, do you play through any effects or anything, or do you just keep it pretty basic? Like, I don't hear a lot of effects in your guitar playing, but maybe there's some stuff going on that I'm not hearing.
It's pretty simple, man. I don't
Okay.
have any kind of special pedals or nothing. I just turn my
Okay.
guitar up, my amp up
Yep.
as loud as I want it, and I turn my guitar up as loud as I want it. I got two pedals that I use. One is a tuner,
Yeah.
and one is an AB box because I play two
Oh.
amps. I play a bass amp and a lead amp at the same time.
I saw that. I saw an Aguilar amp on stage with you, and I wondered if you were.
Yeah.
So you're sending, like, are you sending low strings to the bass amp or something, or what's going on
Yeah,
there?
well, I got for the bass amp, I got a Ampeg,
Uh-huh.
and for the lead amp, I got me a Tone Master Fender Twin.
Nice.
But yeah, that's what I do. I got an AB box that send the signals to each amp, so I can play them both at the same time. And I bring my lows through the bass amp and my highs through the lead.
You're not splitting the output in the guitar at all. It's just coming out. The same signal's going to both amps. You're just
Yep.
dealing with them differently.
Yep, the same signal is going to
Wow.
both amps, and that's what the AB box does. It just, it splits the bass and the lead. But
Yeah.
everything is coming out. When I go to the bass amp, I turn all the highs off the bass amp, and I just
Okay.
use the bottom. So when I go to the lead
Okay.
amp, I turn all the bass off the lead amp, and I just use the highs.
Wow, that's cool,
Yeah.
man. I gotta try that. Do you do that live too, all the
I
time?
do. That's my whole setup. I travel with that setup.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and it's a fat
That's great.
sound, man. It's a really fat sound. I like it a lot.
Okay, well, I don't want to take up your whole day, but before we go, I just wondered if you might be able to share a favorite story of RL's, because he's like just such a iconic musician to me and to many people. And
All right.
you toured with him so much, and he's your grandfather. And I wondered if you might have a good story or something to share about him.
He was good friends with Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. He played with them and laughed and talked and drank moonshine with them. And, he was really good friends with Mississippi Fred McDowell. And those some of the cats that I wish I could have got to shake their hands, and talk to them a little bit as a kid. But he played that music for me as a kid all the time, for all the grandchildren. But I can tell you this story, man. It's a funny story. We was at I think we was in Canada. We was in Canada somewhere. I don't know if it was Toronto or Vancouver. I don't know. Ontario. That's where it was.
Okay. Yeah, Toronto's in Ontario. So
okay. Yeah, so it was Toronto. So we played a venue there, and my big daddy was sitting there. He was playing a guitar, and we started the song, and he wasn't used to a smoke machine. And you know where I'm going with this, right? And so he wasn't used to the smoke machine, and we forgot to tell him, because they had told us before, while we was doing sound check, that they wanted to do a little smoke. Well, we forgot to tell Big Daddy, and as we was playing our song, they turned the smoke machine on, and a little smoke come out. And Big Daddy, he was playing a guitar. He looked a little bit more. And then that smoke started coming. He said, hey, man, something on fire with him, man. He was getting ready to put the guitar down and run off the stage, man. Look, before we could say anything, Kenny Brown and I, man, we was laughing so hard. We couldn't get no words out because we was laughing so hard. We forgot to tell.
Was this during the actual gig, or was this
the
sound check?
An actual show.
Oh my God.
Did
he come back?
The audience was there and everything, man.
Oh my God.
It was so awesome. Funny.
You're going to be touring a lot, I take it, for the rest of the year here. Is that your plan?
That's my plan, man. I'm booked up. I start my tour in March. I opened up for JJ Gray and Mofro for about 20 dates before my CD release tour starts in April. But I start my first show on March 6th with JJ Gray, and I'm booked up already now from March to September. And they still adding them to the books. So to God be the glory. I'm thanking for everything.
And what's your touring setup? It's you and a drummer, or are you bringing a bass player, or what are you doing?
Well, see, that's a good question, man. I am gonna practice with a bass player, because I would love to take a bass player on this CD release tour, just because bass is on all of the songs. It would be different if bass was just on a couple songs, but I wanted to do something different. I wanted to record this album with bass. So, I am going to eventually bring a bass player out on this tour.
You never have other instruments aside from
guitar and drums. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, nice.
Yep, always have guitar and drums.
And are you doing European stuff and overseas things, or are you just staying in North America, or what's your trajectory?
Well, between March and June, I am going to be in the States. During that time, I'm going to do a West Coast tour for the CD release album. And I am going to do an East Coast tour for the CD release album. And then after the East Coast tour, which is supposed to happen in September sometime, I am going to Europe a couple times this year as well. So they putting them on the books for me.
Well, hey man, thanks so much for spending the time with me today. I love your music, and I'm just really excited for the new record to come out and
thank you.
See what happens, and to see you live, I hope. All right, good luck with everything, and man, thanks so much for spending the time with me today.
Well, thanks for having me, man. This has been a bunch of fun, man. It's been a bunch of fun. Thank you.
Music Makers and Soul Shakers is a bi-weekly podcast produced at the Hen House Studio in Nashville, Tennessee. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You can also find us at makersandShakerspodcast.com. Thanks again to our sponsors this season, Larrivee Guitars, Fishman Pickups, Chase Bliss Pedals, Union Tube and Transistor, Spectra 1964, and the Hen House Hang. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.